After performing this experiment on the universal testing machine to obtain the stress strain relation of any material, we will be often interested in finding these two things, right? The first one is something called as percentage elongation, and the second one is percentage reduction in area. So let us see one by one, what do we mean by percentage elongation and what do we mean by percentage reduction in area. We know that this will be the original length of this specimen before we subject this specimen for the testing on the UTM, universal testing machine. And then once the testing is completed, we know that the original length will get elongated because of this plastic deformation, and finally this will be our gauge length, right? So this will be our final length at the fracture, and this will be the original length before we subject the specimen for the testing. Hence, the percentage elongation can be defined as it is a ratio of final extension at the rupture, that means this length, to the original length expressed as percentage. So that means basically it is a ratio of this length, gauge length at the failure, or final length or final extension at the rupture, to that of the original gauge length. All right, and the percentage of that will be called as percentage elongation. So if L is this original length, suppose if L is this original length, and L dash is the length, L dash is the length at rupture, or or at failure. So basically L is this length, L dash is the length at rupture or failure. So length from here to here is the length at failure or length at rupture. So in that case the percentage elongation can be given as, it will be equal to L minus L dash minus L divided by L, right? And this will be multiplied by 100. So this is how we can calculate the percentage elongation, where again what is L? L is original length and L dash is the length at the rupture or this gauge length at the failure. Now regarding this specimen, usually the code specifies that the original length should be 5 times the diameter, 5 times this diameter. See, this original length should be actually 5 times this diameter. All right, and the markings are made at every 2.5 times the distance. So this is how a standard specimen is preferred. And then this is what we need to observe carefully, that in case of ductile material, the percentage elongation is somewhere between 20 to 25%. So this value for a ductile material will come somewhere around 20 to 25%. All right, this was about percentage elongation. But now what is our second parameter which we are looking at is the percentage reduction in area. Look here, earlier when this specimen was prepared, the area was somewhat this, right? Suppose say if this is the capital D. But what happens to this specimen once the rupture occurs or once the failure occurs? We can see that because of neck formation, this area will definitely decrease here. It will decrease, and let this diameter be D. So basically this percentage reduction is in area is nothing but it is the ratio of this area divided, difference between this and this area divided by this area, and we will multiply it by 100 in order to call it as a percentage. So basically percentage reduction in area can be given as A minus A dash divided by A, and we'll have to multiply this by 100, where what is A? A is nothing but A is our original cross sectional area, and A dash is minimum cross sectional area. So basically this A dash will be calculated, after measuring the diameter at the neck. So basically here at this neck position, after this once the rupture or the failure occurs, we can join this specimen, and then the minimum diameter here at the neck can be used to calculate this A dash or the minimum cross sectional area. Now this is what we need to observe, that for steel the percentage reduction in area is somewhere from 60 to 70%. This is what we need to observe. Okay, after looking at this, let us try to understand how the material behaves under compression. Now this is when the earlier stress strain curve which was which was plotted for ductile material was when it was subjected to tensile loading, right? But what will happen if the material or if the specimen is subjected to say compressive loading, right? If this material is subjected to some kind of compressive loading, then whether it will behave the same way as it was behaving when it was subjected to tensile loading. So for this we have to understand this behavior of material under compression. Now usually what is observed is for a ductile material, for a ductile material, the stress strain curves follow exactly the same path as in tensile test, up to and even slightly beyond the yield point. So up to this point, the curve will behave exactly as if it was subjected to tensile loading. But then beyond this, the curve diverges. I mean, the curve will not behave the same way as it was behaving for a tensile loading. All right. So this is the story when a ductile material is subjected to compressive loading. But if the brittle material is subjected to compressive loading, then the curve for the brittle material, when it is subjected to tension or it is subjected to compression, will be totally different from each other. The reason is, the simple fact is that, what about brittle materials? So the properties of brittle material, you must be knowing, there will be so many voids inside and so many defects inside. Now this defects, the effect of these defects enlarges when it is subjected to tensile loading. But then if we subject it to compressive loading, if we subject it to compressive loading, then what will happen is its strength will definitely it will increase. It will be of very large compared to the tensile loading. All right. So therefore, for most of the brittle materials, the ultimate compressive stress in compression is much larger than in tension. And the reason is because of these small defects and voids which are present inside the brittle material. So this is what the difference is between the specimen when it is subjected to compression and when it is subjected to tension. So basically, what we will be in this course, we will be dealing with the material when it is loaded only up to this point, right? And mostly we will be dealing in ductile material. So basically, for us, it won't make much difference if our material is subjected to tensile loading or compressive loading, because within elastic limit we said that it will behave same, right? It will behave exactly same. In fact, it will behave exactly same whether it is subjected to compressive loading or tensile loading. So because of this, in our course, whether if it is subjected to tensile loading or compressive loading, it won't affect in any ways to us in this course. And we will still use this relation, that is stress is proportional to strain. Now once this is done, let us now try to understand what are nominal and true stresses. Now this is a very important topic called as nominal stress and true stress. Now what is nominal stress? Suppose, say, for this case again, we will take the same case. We subject this to a loading of, say, P. All right. And suppose, say, the original cross sectional area is A, original cross sectional area. All right. Now in this case, the nominal stress can be given as sigma is equal to P by A. Now as we are increasing this load, let us say this P reaches to P2. As we are increasing the load, it changed from P2, let us say P2. All right. And in that case, what will happen to this area after some time? As this load we are increasing to P2, this area will decrease, right? And then this area can be denoted with small a. All right. This area can be denoted with small a, or else I will denote it as A2. So in this case, what should be the actual stress? The actual stress in this case will be what? It will be P2 divided by A2 at this junction. It should be P2 divided by A2. And then if we are calculating the stress in this fashion, then this stress is called as true stress. But at this point also, if we calculate the stress as P2 divided by the original area A, then that stress will be again called as the nominal stress. So basically, the difference between nominal stress and true stress is that the nominal stresses are calculated considering the original area irrespective of the what are the changes in the load that has taken place. but the true stress is calculated by considering the actual area at that particular application of load. So this is the difference between true stress and nominal stress. Now if I try to plot how this how what will be the stress strain curve, if I try to plot the stress strain curve for true stress and normal and nominal stress, if I try to plot the stress strain curve for nominal stress and true stress, we know that the nominal stress strain curve looks somewhat like this, right? We had seen this. The nominal stress strain curve will look somewhat like this. But now, since this area is decreasing, that means the true stress will be higher compared to the nominal stress, right? Because if we had considered the nominal stress, then we are considering the original area. But what has happened actually, truly speaking, the area has decreased for the applied load P2. I mean, as we are increasing this load from P to P2, this area has decreased. Now, since the area has decreased, the stresses will increase. Therefore, it can be observed that after this lower yield point, the stress strain curve will behave somewhat like this. That is, the stresses will increase further in this region. All right, so it will behave somewhat like this. But this is true when this is true after lower yield point. And but again, to repeat, our study will be where our study will be only till this point, right, up to yield point in this particular course, mechanics of solids. So we will be not bothered much about this true stress because it starts showing its effect only after lower yield point. All right, so whenever we'll be calculating any stresses, unless and until specified as specifically, we will be only calculating the nominal stresses and not the true stresses. So basically, to define what is nominal stress is nothing but it is what it is load divided by original cross sectional area, right? Nominal stress is nothing but load divided by original cross sectional area. Whereas what will be our true stress now? True stress will be load at that instant divided by actual cross sectional area. It should be actual cross sectional cross sectional area. All right, so these are the definitions of nominal stress and true stress. So let us see our last topic in this video, that is factor of safety. Now we know that this material it will start yielding at this point. It will start yielding at this point, right, which is approximately say 250 MPa. It is approximately 250 MPa for say steel. If we take example of mild steel, this yield strength or yield point will be at around 250 MPa. All right, whereas the ultimate strength of steel is say around 380 megapascals. But now suppose say since this is the ultimate strength of the material, this is the ultimate stress that the material can take. But do you think actually while designing any component, while designing any machine component or any component, can we subject it up to 380 megapascals? Can we subject it up to can we subject the material up to 380 megapascals? Is it possible? Do we think it will be able to sustain this much of stresses in it? Yes, the theoretical value says that, right? But actually, truly speaking, what happens is the reliability of material may not be 100%. All right, there may be some flaws in it. We can't say. There can be always some flaws which can get generated inside the material because of some molding processes. All right, then the resulting deformation may obstruct the functionality performance of the component. Also, there can be occasionally there can be cases of overloading, or suddenly say the loads that come on that component which we have designed for 380 megapascals might get overload. All right, there can be unexpected impact and temperature loadings on that. All right, so there are so many factors which may not actually allow the material to withstand up to 380 megapascals of load. although it theoretically it says that it may able to withstand this 380 megapascals of stresses, but there may be certain conditions like this which have been mentioned here, which may not allow this material to withstand the stress of up to 380 megapascals. So as a design engineer, what we can do is, hence the maximum stress to which any member is designed we can keep it much less than the ultimate stress, and we can call it as a working stress. To give you an example, what we can do is, although we know now the ultimate strength of the material is 380 megapascals, but what we can do, we can say that we can design the machine or design any component in such a way that the maximum stress which can get developed in it can be only, say, 190 megapascals. So basically now this is what? This is the ultimate stress, right? This is the ultimate stress. Whereas what is this now? We have designed it in such a way that the maximum stresses which will be induced in that material will be only 190 megapascal. So what is this? This is actually the working stress. Working stress, or actually the stresses which will come on that material. Now we can define this factor of safety, FOS. So we can define this factor of safety as ultimate stress divided by working stress. So this is how we can define factor of safety. So in this example which I had given you all, in this case the factor of safety will turn out to be 2. But if we want to use a elastic material for any applications, then we know that its behavior as elastic material will remain only up to this point, and the moment we go beyond this point, it will not behave as if it is elastic. So in order to retain that property of elastic behavior of a material, in that case we would like to subject it only up to the yield strength, right? Only up to the yield strength. So in that case the factor of safety for elastic material, the factor of safety can be given as, we won't be subjecting it to up to ultimate stress, right? In order to retain its elastic behavior, we will be subjecting it only up to yield stress. So in that case, for elastic material to retain its behavior, we will subject it to only up to yield stress. So theoretical yield stress value divided by working stress, and this will be the factor of safety of this elastic, for the elastic material. All right, so just observe these values. For a steel material, the elastic, I mean the factor of safety which is considered is 1.85, whereas for concrete the factor of safeties are very high, so it is up to around 3, whereas for timber like wood and all, the factor of safety becomes more high, that is 4 to 6. So as we are increasing the factor of safety, we will be over designing the component or machine. And to give you example of higher factor of safety, you must have witnessed any old temples and all. You must have visited any old temples and all, wherein you must have seen that their pillars are very big in size, right? They are very big in cross sectional areas, the pillars of any old temple. Or if you have seen your ancestral house, even their walls, you must have seen, they are very thick. The reason is that time, since they had no means to calculate proper factor of safety, they were using very large amount of material in order to build any structures. So because of that the factor of safety was very high, and because of that the material which they were using was very high. All right, so this is what happens if you choose very high factor of safety. If you choose very high factor of safety, you will invest more in the material. If you choose very less factor of safety, there are chances that your material might fail. So because of that, your factor of safety has to be optimum, and this is just a guideline to choose how to choose a factor of safety for common materials which are used in engineering constructions.